welcome to another episode of Touring the AFC South. I'm your host, Mike Patton, and on this episode, we have a very, very special guest. I'm losing track of all the different things that my guest does. He's an NFL analyst. You see him on CBS. You see him NFL Network. You see the mock drafts. You see was soon to be CBS Sports Big Ten. Of course, you know the voice on the NFL game. I mean. Is there anything that you don't do? I'm sorry, I didn't introduce. My guest for this episode is Mr. Charles Davis. Is there anything you don't do?
A lot, Mike, as you well know. I'm lucky to be doing the few things that I'm able to do and have this opportunity, but the answer is considerable. A lot of things out there I don't do, and just like you, we're all still chasing. You know, you wake up every day and you're chasing something new, trying to get to another place, trying to make it all happen. But as you know, in your career, nothing good happens more if you're not taking care of business in the spot you're in. And that's what I think you do every day. And that's what I try to do as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you again for coming on the show. And one of those things that you do is you create a excellent mock draft. It's not one that's cookie cutter and goes towards every other one that you see out there. It's definitely one that you can tell you've thought about, you put some time into, and you crafted just based solely off of your info, your intel, and just the things that you thought about each particular team. I just want to thank you again for doing those mock drafts and being kind of different than the norm.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And Mike, I don't know really, what the degree of anyone's mock draft is. We all come at it from different angles, right? We all come at with different motivations. I will just tell you, every time I do a mock draft, I want to have a degree of plausibility in it, a strong degree of plausibility, meaning this could legitimately happen. All right. I think my first one I did when I had Jackson Dart at number 3 to the Giants, everybody had a stroke like that. That just absolutely couldn't happen. And when I sent it out, it was 1 week before free agency kicked in. And Mike, I put him there at 3 because I had a strong sense that once we got into free agency, some of these quarterback needy teams would get quarterbacks. And if they did, now the pressure increases on those who did not get them. And I correctly anticipated that in free agency, the Giants would make some moves, but not big enough moves that you were going to say you don't still need a quarterback. Other people filled their role where you could kind of say, hey, I can get out of that for a little bit now. Meaning Las Vegas got Geno Smith and cemented him as their starter. The Jets got Justin Fields, cemented him as their starter. As we sit here talking now, we know now that Derek Carr needs shoulder surgery. But back at that time, Mickey Loomis, our general manager, said, Derek Carr's our quarterback. He's our ride or die. So I went off of his word, and now all of a sudden you're squeezed. Now all of a sudden you're saying the top 3 teams in this draft are really quarterback needy. And if you don't get them then, are you going to be able to circle back? That's where my plausibility came in. So I gave him Jackson Dart at 3, and let me tell you, the hubbub was unbelievable. Everybody thought, I'd slipped a cog, right? But if you look at it and think about over the years the number of quarterbacks who got pushed up in the draft that you look back later and go, he went when? It's plausible. That's all I'm saying. Do I still think it's going to happen? Probably not. Not likely. My second mock draft, he wasn't there. I've got one more to do right before the draft comes out. Highly unlikely he'll be at number 3 to the Giants. But was there plausibility? Was there a thing that if a team liked a quarterback or needed one? The answer is yes. I will defend that one going forward. As you said, I try not to be cookie cutter, but I'm not sure anyone does. I think we're all looking for something a little bit different in our mock drafts. I just want mine to be something that when I have an explanation for it, it actually can make sense.
Got you. Okay. So, the thing that, speaking of making sense, the thing that's making a lot of sense for a lot of people is the Titans and the number 1 overall pick. We're going to go to the Titans real quick. And, in your mock draft and pretty much every mock draft, they have the Titans picking University of Miami quarterback Cam Ward. So, has Cam Ward been your guy from the beginning with the Titans?
No, and not because of any other reason than my first mock draft. It was Shedeur Sanders 1 to the Titans, Cam Ward 2 to Cleveland. Okay, I went off of, and you've seen the Titans play even more than I did. I do the preseason, then I got them in the regular season, I think against the Jets, and I think that's the last time I saw them in live last year. But there were many weeks where Will Levis's name came up on the national scene, and usually not for positive reasons. He would make plays that were out of structure that turned into disasters. The first 2 weeks of the season pretty much encapsulated it, right? So when I looked at it, that first mock draft, Shedeur Sanders plays much more in structure than Cam Ward does. Shedeur Sanders is going to be a little bit more of the drop back guy, although he can move some. But Cam Ward makes a lot more plays outside the pocket, buying extra time, big throws across his body, downfield, all of those things. And I just thought to myself in my first mock draft, I don't know if Brian Callahan wants to see much more of that because he's got that already. Okay. So that's why Shedeur went 1 and 2. But as time has gone on, when you talk to people around the league, when you feel a consensus, it certainly feels like Cam Ward has separated himself as the number 1 quarterback in this draft. And I still believe that Mike Margonzi, the new general manager, Chad Brinker now, who runs the whole football department, I still think that they will pick up their phones every time it rings and hope someone will bring them what John Robinson got in 2016, which was a king's ransom for the first pick. But I don't think the king's ransom's coming. So if they have conviction and they feel like Cam Ward's the guy, I think they stick there and pick. I just don't think that same type of an offer is coming this year in this draft for any player, for anyone to come up and get anyone. I just don't think it's available. I just don't think anyone's going to make that kind of an offer. So call me surprised on opening night of the draft if all of a sudden we have a blockbuster trade in the first round because someone came up to get someone and it's a big bonanza. I will be absolutely stunned. You might hear a big thud as my head hits the desk in Green Bay because I just don't see that it's going to happen. I think most people are going to stick and pick at their spot. And if there are trades, it certainly won't be a king's ransom involved.
Okay. All right. So, of course, like I mentioned, Cam Ward at number 1. What's your kind of your thoughts, kind of the fit there potentially with what they do and don't have? Because, of course, the wide receiver, they have Calvin Ridley, but, they really don't have a number 2. Yeah. You have Van Jefferson that's there. He's more likely a 3. Tight end, you have a little bit of inconsistency there. Running back, Tony Pollard definitely did a lot better than what some thought. So with that being said, and those, that what all is there in the upgrade, I would say, in the offensive line.
Yeah.
What do you think of his fit there with what they currently have?
Well, I think
if he is picked by the Titans, by the way.
You're right, Mike. I think we all have to keep that in mind. If indeed he is picked, I'm glad you said that and reminded me of it. If he is the pick, it's a building block where this is another reset of your franchise and starting over, and you're going to build around him. You mentioned it already started with the offensive line, getting Dan Moore from Pittsburgh, who has gotten better in his time in the league. And that allows you to take J.C. Latham and slide him back to what's probably a more natural right tackle position for him. Peter Skoronski, remember, first-round pick a couple years ago. He's been cemented in at guard. So they've got to keep going there. Obviously, trying to get back what's his name we got from Denver, Cushenberry, right? If he's back, he's healthy, back at center. You have the makings and the startings of a much improved offensive line, and that's what you're going to need because with a rookie quarterback taken at number 1 overall, the expectation is they're going to start him day 1. Okay, that's just kind of how this game works. It's rare that they get to sit and do the Mahomes thing and sit out a first year, et cetera. Could they? Sure. But we're going to start Will Levis again if you drafted the first-round pick. Fans aren't going to sit around for that very long, and I doubt Miss Amy is going to sit around very long for that as well, if indeed he is the pick. So that's why you're starting there with a new face of the franchise, and now it's up to Mike Margonzi to build around him, to continue to acquire more talent, get you wide receivers, right? Get you tight ends, get you players there that's going to continue to build this franchise. But you do start with the quarterback. Because, Mike, if you miss at the quarterback position, X number of years ago, you set your franchise back 5 years. Now, if you miss, you know what you do the next year? You swing again and get another one. The Cardinals, moved up to get Josh Rosen. That didn't work. The very next year, the number 1 pick in the draft, they took Kyler Murray. That was unheard of in the old collective bargaining when you paid that quarterback $50 million. Now you
Right.
can do that. The cost benefits and the cost effectiveness are there. So to me, you keep swinging until you get your quarterback. All right. You don't let that set you back and have your franchise held hostage.
Right, right. And like you mentioned before, the chances that they trade that number 1 pick right now at this point are pretty slim to none at this point. But of course, we have seen stranger things happen.
You're right
Speaking of
about
stranger things
that.
happen, speaking of stranger things happening, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars were a team that a lot of people thought that so I would say Jacksonville fans down there on 1010XL, they definitely thought that Jacksonville would compete with Houston for the division.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
However, it did not work out that way. Coach got fired, GM got fired. Now they got Liam Cohen, they got Gladstone as the general manager, and they picked up a few offensive linemen, things like that, kind of getting going again. So, with Liam Cohen, he definitely talks about being physical and things like that. And in your mock draft, you had Armand Membo as the pick for them at number 5. He's an offensive lineman, offensive tackle out of Missouri. Now with them signing Walker Little to an extension, and also Anton Harrison there from a couple years ago, do you see Membo coming in, and if he is the pick, and kind of placing Little as the swing tackle, and then Anton Harrison being the starter, or Anton Harrison sitting? How do you kind of envision that if indeed Membo is the pick?
Yeah, if Membo's the pick, the way I would envision it is Harrison has done a really nice job on the right side for them since they picked him out of Oklahoma. Walker Little's been a swing tackle most of his career because Cam Robinson had been there. So when Cam Robinson got traded to Minnesota, Walker Little's got to be the starter, and they think that he can be a starter for them. But if Membo gets there and can play the left side for them, I think Walker Little becomes your swing guy, because I think Membo is only going to continue to get better. And it'd be very interesting what they do. Now, people may have forgotten Jonathan Ogden, one of the all-time great offensive linemen. Remember when he went to the Baltimore Ravens? Where did he play his rookie year, Mike?
I think he played. He did.
Guard.
Wow.
Yeah, he played guard, and they played him at guard the entire year. And then they moved him to the left tackle spot where he cemented himself. And then we got to get a lot of extra fabric for a gold jacket because that's a really big man. So there's always that possibility for Jacksonville as well. But as we go along, and I don't have a ton of experience with Liam Cohen, our group was lucky enough last year that down the stretch, we ended up having a Tampa Bay Carolina game. It was literally the first time I had been in contact with Liam Cohen. I knew who he was, but I hadn't had a contact with him. He'd either been in college or we hadn't had their games or whatever. And I spent a little time with him, got ready for the Tampa Bay game, came away very impressed in our short time. And then in our game, they blew away Carolina. That offense was just humming, right? Bucky Irving was a 4th-round pick last year out of Oregon, who supplanted Rachaad White at the running back position and really helped power them. You mentioned the offensive line moves that have already been made by Jacksonville. I gave them Membo at the time. What if they go ahead and get crazy and grab the number 1 runner in the draft right there at 5? What if they go get Ashton Jeanty right there and try and get things kick-started for Liam Cohen's offense? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. My only thing is, anytime you get a good runner, you better have some people who can block for him, because as good as Saquon Barkley was with the Giants, his greatness really came out when he was with Philadelphia and that big green wall was moving people up front. That's the only thing I would say about that. But Jeanty could be a heck of a starting block for them because of his ability to run it, catch it out of the backfield, and help kickstart what Liam Cohen likes to do on offense.
Yeah, it would be interesting as well, because they would definitely, at this point, looking at Travis Etienne, a guy they took, 4 or 5 years ago in the first round, along with Trevor Lawrence, it just doesn't seem like he's the guy there. So to me, it would seem like Jeanty would be there, and somehow, some way, they would move on from Etienne and, move forward with Jeanty as the running back.
Yeah, I do think, Mike, it's the age old, like Portland Trail Blazers. As many times that'll be used until the end of sports, right? They had Clyde Drexler, so we don't need Michael Jordan because they're essentially the same guy. That logic, we've all learned that lesson. How many people keep absorbing that lesson, right? You always can make your team better. Etienne's a really good football player, but he kind of peaked, as you mentioned, 2 years ago, and it just hasn't held since that time. Kind of the same with Trevor Lawrence. The difference is that quarterback, you're going to try your best to make that thing work. And by the way, if you get a guy who's better than the guy you have, nothing wrong with that. You just go do that. Your team gets better by doing that. That's why I think Genty's in play. I'm not saying he's absolutely the pick, but he's in play right there because we're right in the sweet spot. Because if he doesn't go at 5 to Jacksonville, Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders and how Pete Carroll likes to play, they're sitting right there at 6. That's almost central casting. So we'll see how this goes down when we get closer to Green Bay.
Yeah, definitely. Steven Askins, who's in the Touring The AFC South inbox, he definitely responded to the Genty pick and said, yeah, that would be crazy. It would be crazy good to happen. It would be fun to watch. Yeah. Well,
hey,
if you're not a
Jacksonville fan, in Green Bay to hear the roar, I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you're a Jacksonville fan, you might be confused but still like it. But outside of that, I don't think any teams in the AFC South would love to see Ashton Genty run the football at all.
He's a good player.
Definitely. Another guy that has been talked about with that number 5 pick is Mason Graham, the interior defensive lineman from the University of Michigan. Now, he's been mentioned over and over again. He's talked about, his physicality, the way he takes it to the offensive line. Of course, they talked about his arm length and things like that, which, that's, to me, I'm like, I get that, but, can he play is what I gather from that. But what do you think if they do pick him? It would be the 3rd defensive lineman that they have taken in the last 6 years in the first round.
Yeah, kind of reminds you of Washington a few years ago, doesn't it?
Yeah,
remember definitely. First round lineman, but anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Definitely reminds you of Washington, but or you could kind of flip it in a different way to the offensive side of the ball with Detroit and then picking wide receiver after wide receiver after wide receiver.
Well, that's taking us back a ways, huh?
definitely. I dug in the history books for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as Mason Graham, if he is the pick there, I mean, what do you think of his fit with that defensive line when you got Eric Armstead who's going to probably be full-time defensive tackle this year, Josh Hines-Allen defensive end, you got a Trayvon Walker at the other defensive end. I mean, and just, I know Foya Oluokun has got to be licking his chops if that happens.
Oh, he would be so happy because now he's clean to run to the ball in almost every play, right? He's not having to hand fight that guard who has slipped off of the front line and gotten up to the second level. Now you got to wrestle him in order to shed him and go get a ball carrier, right? You're clean. Your eyes are free. You're able to roam all the way in that little triangle from the middle to really the tight end on each side, tight end box on each side, and you just clean up. And then, of course, you can roam to the sidelines from there as well. So he would love that. Mason Graham, look, he's not going to look the part. Like if you go down there in pregame, Mike, and you say, hey, who's that guy whose uniform looks kind of dumpy on him? He doesn't look quite right. Oh, that's Mason Graham. No, it's not until you watch him play. And then he comes off the ball, punches a guy in the chest, knocks him back, creates rubble. Josh Hines-Allen will be very happy, as you noted. Trayvon Walker will be very happy, as you noted. Eric Armstead will be very happy because now you're eliminating everyone really coming to them. Now you got to make it more of a one-on-one battle. And now everyone else's talents can shine. So that's why Mason Graham makes a lot of sense there. And then remember, in the South, Houston wants to run the ball big with Joe Mixon, don't they? And they are the team you have to beat, right? They're the team you've got to go get. Jonathan Taylor wants to get back to his ways of running the football inside and get going again. And can they get things going? Can Quentin Nelson create space for them again? Well, that's what Mason Graham would be there for, to help discourage some of that. So, as you know, when you're trying to build and you're trying to get back right again, you got to do it through your division first. Got to. Right. That's how people build rosters. Because if you win your division, you're in the playoffs, right? So who's the team you're chasing right now? It's Houston. Everybody's got to figure out how to beat Houston.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Now, I'm going to ask this question, and I know that, many Jacksonville fans were talking about this from the beginning, and they were thinking this could potentially happen. Now, me personally, I don't see it happening, but there would have to be some fluke or stroke of luck, but anything, like we mentioned, can happen in the draft. Is there any chance that Travis Hunter slides to Jacksonville?
Ooh, it's a great one. Well, here's the scenario. Quarterbacks at 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's say Cleveland, because we've heard recently Cleveland's not really thinking quarterback. Just sign Flacco, right? Have Kenny Pickett. Might want to do something else or get a quarterback later in the draft. But let's just say we go quarterbacks 1 and 2. All right. Now we get to 3 with the Giants. Let's say they want Abdul Carter because the New York Giants franchise is built on defense. It's baked into their DNA. All right. New England at 4 is going to be your problem because they need firepower like you would not believe. All right. And they addressed a lot of their free agency questions on defense during free agency. They brought in some more people and all. I think that they would draft Travis Hunter at 4 and want to play him at wide receiver. But that would be interesting as heck if all of a sudden something else kicked in along the way, because here's where it could kick in. Let's say New England looks up and says Drake May must be protected at all costs, and they go with the top offensive lineman there at 4. That would be the scenario that you'll get your Travis Hunter to 5. I think it's highly doubtful. I don't see people passing on Hunter in that spot. But New England's offensive line is so abysmal that there's some plausibility to the idea that they take a top offensive tackle there, because right now they're really struggling at that position.
Definitely, definitely. Of course, somebody struggling at a position is the Indianapolis Colts, and that's a tight end position. They drafted Kylan Granson. He, of course, didn't work out. Now he's playing for the Eagles. You have Jelani Woods. He was, a guy that many thought would fit in and be the next
Great
tight end
catch
for them.
radius.
Yes, huge man. Ends up, but he's always injured. So that part, doesn't help. And then, of course, Mo Alley Cox, one great success story of turning from basketball player to football player, but he's just not the guy at tight end. So, with that being said, in your last mock draft, you had Colston Loveland out of Michigan being the pick for the Colts at tight end. And, my thought is, with what all has gone on and, just the injuries and the bad luck at the tight end position, is there going to be some tight end trepidation for the Colts at any point?
Great alliteration, Mike. And there'd be tight end trepidation because they keep thinking they're getting it right, and it hasn't happened yet. And they've got to be a little confused by that. But you can't be daunted by past failures. You need this person. And it's not just because the tight end position hasn't played extremely well for you. You've got to get a young quarterback you took it for 2 years ago and get him right. You've got to give him his best opportunity. Mike, you've been around the league a long time. I don't care if you're a veteran or a young quarterback. A good tight end is the best friend a quarterback can have. You're getting those sighted throws where they're right in your sight line, easier shots across the middle, right in the mid-range there, up the seams, all those things that help your completion percentage. If you get one of those guys who can make the catch and do more, look, Brock Bowers with the Raiders last year made Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew viable at times. All right? That's what that tight end can do for you. Kelsey, for all those years in Kansas City, has only enhanced what Mahomes can do, as we well know, right? So you just go right on down the line about what those greats have done. Peyton Manning, as great as he is, you think he would have turned down any time with Dallas Clark? I don't think so. That works pretty well, right? Gronk, Brady, we can just go on and on and on. A great tight end enhances an offense in a big, big way. And I just don't think that you just shy away from it. Yeah, you have trepidation because you want to make sure you get it right. But your bigger trepidation is, are we going to have Anthony Richardson have his best chance for success since we drafted him so high? Because remember, he's competing now with Daniel Jones from the Giants. And you've heard the whispers. They're not even whispers. People are openly saying, if it's a true open competition, Daniel Jones might very well beat out Anthony Richardson. That's going to be wild to watch. I can't wait for the summer to kick in and see what happens with the Colts. But it makes sense to me because, remember, if I'm giving them Loveland at 14, I probably
Mhm.
have Tyler Warren going somewhere else earlier. And if I remember correct, I think it was the Jets
Right.
at 7.
Yes, it was the Jets at 7. Yeah,
So,
definitely was the Jets at 7. I honestly, in some mock drafts, earlier I was like, okay, Warren could be the guy here
yeah.
for them, and because he most to me he most reminds me of Dallas Clark when it comes
Mhm.
to fitting their offense. But yeah, I could
Right
see the
down
tight
to the
end from out of
number.
Michigan now. What's that?
Right down to the number, jersey
Yes,
number.
sir. Yes,
I got the
sir. You got
44
it.
going. Yeah, yeah. So it's gonna be interesting as heck. And there are a lot of people, I will tell you, a number of scouts out there who really like Loveland. Like they'll
Mhm.
entertain a debate of Loveland versus Warren. That's how good, that's how much they consider Loveland a good player. He was hurt for a portion of last year, couldn't do the
Mhm.
entire year, but his catches went up, yards per catch went up in the time that he could play. Warren, of course, made every highlight play we know. So it's a little bit different because when you start telling fans Warren, they're really juiced up for that guy. In fact, the guy who cuts my hair, the few hairs I have left on my head, he's a Giants fan, and he's chirping at me about getting Warren at 3. So that tells you how much people like Tyler Warren.
Right, right. Now, speaking of this draft pick, you know, we do talk about the tight end trepidation and potentially a tight end there. But, this defense, for all it's worth, did have a lot of injuries. Also, wasn't very effective at times. And one of those reasons was the cornerback position. Now, they went and got Mooney Ward. They went and got Cam Bynum at safety. But, of course, they could get greedy and they could go after a potential Mr. Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan. Now, he was hurt a lot during the pre-draft kind of, rundown with I believe a hamstring issue.
Yeah.
But he's more and more healthy now. So to
Yes.
me, does it make sense for a potential landing spot of Will Johnson in Indy?
It certainly does. Mike, I like where your head is. I like the way you're thinking because you're also taking into account that Lou Anarumo is now the new defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts. And what
Mm-hmm.
position does Lou Anarumo really, really like on his defense? Defensive
Oh, he loves
backs,
some corners.
right? Those are his babies, the entire thing. He wants his safety to be like a shortstop and second baseman in the middle of the baseball field where everything works really well. Their ability to handle the ball, make the changes, do all the stuff, turn the double play in the middle, dependable and strong down the middle. He wants that. And then he wants to be able to let his corners be able to play. But he wants supreme communication back there. All right. I still remember DJ Reader when he was still in Cincinnati talking to him one time. I said, "How's it going, DJ?" He said, "Oh, until Lou gets his babies going back there." He said, "Man, he loves those DBs." Well, that makes sense with what you're talking about, being able to get better out on the corner. And by the way, you got to get better on the corner because Nico Collins is out there. All right,
Mm-hmm.
from Houston. All right, you got to deal with him. Calvin Ridley, when he's on his game, you're dealing with him with Tennessee. Jacksonville, trying to get things figured out. Obviously, they don't have the same people there anymore, but they're trying to make those leaps and bounds, and they're trying to get Trevor Lawrence going. So you're always thinking to yourself, what do we have to combat the best in our division? And right now, Nico Collins looks like Secretariat at times when he's running routes out there.
He definitely does. He's definitely a guy that I did not expect him to become what he's become.
Yeah.
And he has been amazing as a Houston Texan. Now, I will say in Jacksonville, they do have to worry about teams have to worry about Brian Thomas Jr. But of course, he's got to get his Robin to go along with his Batman, though.
Yeah,
So
be
we'll
able to
see what happens.
help him out, take some pressure off him. But boy, he had a magnificent rookie year, didn't he?
Definitely, definitely did. And of course, O line could potentially be a possibility, but I see that more as, more the second, third, and fourth rounds. That's just basically what the Colts do. They do draft, they drafted, of course, Quentin Nelson, but other than that, they've really kind of drafted in the second, third, and fourth rounds and times like that to build
And
their
for a
O line
while
up.
there, they had one of the better offensive lines in the league when Anthony Costanzo was still there at left tackle, Quentin Nelson at left guard. You had Ryan Kelly at center. Glowinski was playing right guard. And Braden Smith, who had been drafted as a guard, they moved out to right tackle. And they had a really good offensive line. But over time, there's been some attrition, and the same guys aren't there now.
Right, right. Speaking of the same guys not being there, we've got to talk about the Houston Texans. They have maybe one guy returning from last year's O line.
Yeah.
Other than that, of course, they traded Laramie Tunzel. They to the Washington Commanders, by the way. They traded Kenyon Green to the Philadelphia Eagles, brought in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, which I'm pretty sure I've said this before. They have the best collection of safeties in the division, and
Yeah,
maybe across the actual
done well.
conference or league, basically.
Yeah, I
Because
would agree.
Jalen Petrie is a big nickel, but he can still play corner too. You got Jimmy Ward that can play safety and corner, and come down and play the nickel. And he's probably going to be a guy that's going to be the odd man out.
Yeah, it's
So
going to be interesting to watch how that develops, isn't it? Because of Kalen Bullock coming in last year and
right,
playing so well. And when Petrie's healthy, you cannot keep him off the field. He does so many things for you. You mentioned him being kind of a nickel safety for you, and he can do that quite well. And he was having a very good year, but when he got hurt last year. So I agree with you totally. They're very good on the back end right now.
right. Now, getting back to the mock draft, you had, I believe, Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, going at number 25 to the Houston Texans. Can you kind of tell us what you saw and kind of the fit there for him in
Yeah.
Houston, provided he is the pick?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because, as you mentioned, this Houston offensive line, which we thought was making steps towards being, okay, this is what we're going to have. The Tunsil trade was a shocker to a lot of people. Despite all the penalties he accumulated, he's still one of the better left tackles in the league. So if he's going to go, who's going to play left tackle? That's your first thought. Well, remember they drafted the young man out of Notre Dame last year, Fisher, who they played on the right side last year because they took Titus Howard, the right tackle, and ultimately moved him inside to guard on the left side. Now, that'll be interesting to see what they decide to do. Do they decide to take Fisher, who had been a left tackle, in order to take him back and put him back on the left side? Do you move Titus Howard back to right tackle? Do you make Juice Scruggs your starting center? Do you continue to roll with Jarrett Patterson? You see where I'm going with this? It's a lot of mixing and matching and who goes where. They've got to figure out what their best five are. But Tyler Booker is almost a no-brainer by anybody to take him inside. I mean, you go to Alabama, they just rave about him. You turn on the tape, and he's road grading people and pushing people out of the way. He helps solidify people up front. And by the way, you've got a young quarterback that if you can provide that nice pocket and especially be able to be strong up the middle so he can step up and make his throws, which is what Sean Payton did for all those years in New Orleans to help a shorter quarterback, even shorter than C.J. Stroud, some guy named Breeze, become magnificent because he created that with those horses up front, center, two guards, form that area. He steps up and throws it and eliminates the height issue for him, and things work out really well. That's what's going to be interesting to see there, and that's one of the reasons I gave him Booker. Take care of C.J. Stroud so he can continue to make the plays you need to have made to keep you afloat and atop the division in the AFC South.
Now, of course, Tyler Booker. That is a very, very logical.
Yeah, Joe Mixon will like him too in the run game.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, Joe Mixon will love him.
Yeah.
But of course, you talked about C.J. Stroud and throwing to his weapons and things like that. Well, Diggs isn't there this year. He's out with he missed like most of last year with the ACL. Now he's playing in New England. Tank Dell more than likely is going to be out for the year, if not later in the year.
Still healing, yeah.
Right, and then you got Christian Kirk you traded for, but he's also had injury issues the last couple of years. So to me, I'm looking at it, and there's a potential need for a wide receiver at that's number 25 for the Texans. So to me, would it be out of the realm of possibility that they could potentially go wide receiver like a guy like maybe a Luther Burden from the Missouri Tigers, perhaps?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think a Luther Burden and a Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Tet McMillan could be down there at 25. Matthew Golden from Texas. I mean, there are a number of good receivers that matter picking your flavor. You've got the big guy out wide in Nico Collins, who's going to make a lot of plays for you, right? You're bringing in Christian Kirk, who can run your slot, can run outside as well. But the way that they're doing it, wanting to mix and match and rotate receivers, all those guys make sense to me because every single one of them is a playmaker. Put the ball in their hands, they get extra yardage, make extra plays downfield, and off they go. I do think Burden has been overlooked a little bit in this run-up to the draft because 2 years ago his numbers were much better. Last year's quarterback was hurt part of the year. Other things happened. you get the whole idea. He comes from a big basketball background. Grandfather, Tiki Burden, was a former ABA, NBA player, terrific player. His father played in the old Continental Basketball Association. So you can see some of that basketball in his movements when he's running out of the slot and he's crossing over people and posting people up in the short zones, catching the football and turning and going. So I like where your head is on that one. I like your thinking. Would not surprise me at all with a pretty high-powered offense already. Sometimes you just tune it up bigger and make people really chase you.
Well, they say everything's bigger in Texas, so hey,
Yeah, no question about that. If you don't believe it, just ask them; they'll tell you.
Right. And last thing I want to talk about is there potential? Honestly, I know the Texans are trying to revamp their O-line and, fill a different, voids offensively. Is there potential that they trade this pick as well to gain more picks? Maybe trade down to maybe the beginning of the second round and allow a team to come up?
Sure, always that potential. And if you're talking about sitting there at 25, a lot of it's going to depend on what happens with where does Shedeur Sanders go if he's indeed the second quarterback in this draft. Is there a feel that there needs to be a third quarterback in the first round? Did he go yet? Did Pittsburgh at 21 take him? You see, that's kind of because I'm looking at the pressure points, right? We know Tennessee at 1 is a pressure point. 2 at Cleveland's a pressure point. 3 with the Giants a pressure point. I think our next one is probably New Orleans at 9, especially with the news of Derek Carr's shoulder. Okay. Can we make a case for anyone else in there? Probably all the teams in there aren't really quarterback needy. But if you are quarterback needy, do you want to come up and make sure you get your guy? Because Pittsburgh, I'm sure they'd love to sit there at 21. And if there's a quarterback they like, they'd be able to take them right there. But if not, now maybe something goes around and people would love to drop back and accumulate more picks. Because, Mike, in this draft, I've had enough of the people who really know what they're talking about, the people who do it every day. They've all said to me essentially the same thing in different words, but it all comes out the same way. There's not a lot of difference between picks in 10 through 70. It's not that much difference, right? Picks 5 through 80. There's not a ton of difference. It's not like you're saying, okay, the first 20 guys off the board, gotta have them. Yeah, they're rated higher than the other guys. But if you miss or if you don't get that guy, the next guy off the board at that position, I don't think you're waking up going, oh my God, there's such a gap between them. It's not that type of a draft. You're getting essentially the same person, or so it feels. And you and I both know people will separate themselves when we get to the NFL. Things don't just stay static, right? But when you're going into the draft, if I don't get Matthew Golden, but I get Luther Burden, I'm okay, right? I don't think I'm losing any sleep on the whole thing, right? If I don't get Mason Graham, okay? If I don't get Mason Graham, but I get Walter Nolan, think I'm okay. I mean, I don't think I'm going, oh man, oh, that's a killer. So that's not to denigrate the guys at the top of the draft. And it's not to say that the guys behind them aren't as good. I think it's one of those drafts where we're getting a lot of similarities amongst players. And then it'll be fun to see which ones truly emerge as superstars. Because it's hard to put your true finger on that one. Okay? I mean, look, Kareem Hunt was what, a third-round pick out of Toledo how many years ago? Because Andy Reid was drawing up ball plays and Maction was on his TV in his office and he kept seeing this guy. Like 3 times he watched him play, and he went to his GM and said, I like this runner. Can we give him more? Third round, his first game was a Thursday nighter in New England against the defending Super Bowl champs. Fumbled in the first quarter, I think on his first carry in the NFL. And I don't know that he's fumbled again in the NFL. And he led the league in rushing as a rookie. These are the types of things that happen and emerge, and most of the time, none of us can predict it.
Right. I understand that. Yeah, well, I know we're coming up against time, but I definitely want to thank you for going through the AFC South with me and all the different players. and potential picks. Of course, it's going to be interesting to see where some of these guys go. Also, another guy that I think is going to be interesting to watch where he goes. And, for those that in the South that, SEC flavor, that'd be Shamar Stewart
Oh
from
yeah,
uh, from Texas
Texas
A&M because
A&M.
he's physical specimen,
Yep.
but the production doesn't match the physical specimen to me, which kind of I think is truly interesting there.
Yeah,
I mean, do you
and
have
Mike.
any kind of quick thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple quick thoughts because I thought that Shamar Stewart, and you mentioned how physical what a specimen he is. I think that if he plays lighter, that's the Shamar Stewart that we really were crazy about. Not that we don't like the 280, 285 pound Shamar Stewart. I like the 265-pound Shamar Stewart. That guy makes more plays for me in the pass game and gets upfield on the quarterback. The 285-pound guy makes plays, but not at the same rate and is a little more of a base guy. And last I saw, I heard he was weighing somewhere around 260 pounds. And I think
Oh,
that's
he's
good
there
for
now.
him going into the
Okay.
draft. I think that's really, really good for him. So let's see how that goes. And Mike, I'm just going to leave you with this. When someone can figure out college production and how it totally translates to the pros for pass rushers, please let me know because I've been struggling with that like crazy. I just can't really get it. Chop Robinson was 4.5 sacks his last year at Penn State. The second half of his rookie year last year, Miami was sensational, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Adafe Owe went in the first round out of Penn State back when he was known as Jason Owe. 0 sacks his senior year, still went in the first round. Remember, Trayvon Walker didn't have a ton of sack production at Georgia. His last 2 years in the NFL, he's been double digits both years. Okay. Daniil Hunter, 100 sacks in the NFL now, playing with Houston at this point. He used to be in Minnesota. You know how many sacks he had in his entire career at LSU? He had 4.5. So
wow.
all I'm saying is I can't totally put my finger on it. Sometimes those numbers match. Aiden Hutchinson had a lot of production in Michigan. It's matched real well in the NFL, especially before he got hurt. So sometimes it does, but sometimes it could be the scheme. It could be other things. Because Trayvon Walker's more of a base end at Georgia. Now he's getting turned loose a little bit more in the NFL. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But call me, please, when you figured out how to crack that code because I need the help.
I understand. And I needed the help as well. Kind of breaking down some of these players, some of these draft picks, and some of what could we expect when it comes to the draft coming to the AFC South. Now, of course, we do have some comments in the Touring the AFC South inbox from Lindsay Durham. She said, thanks, guys, for the conversation.
Thanks,
somebody was looking at your room. Music City Bets was. They said, Charles Davis has a nice room.
But thank you. Really appreciate that. That's very kind. Very, very kind. Yeah, try and keep my books up there, keep my reading going. And in a couple of weeks when the draft's over, I'll get back to some of that good pleasure reading again.
Got you. And then Corey Jackson Sr. said great content. So he enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Corey. And that's a tribute to you, Mike, because you're the one bringing them the great content. We're us on this end, and I'll speak for myself. I'm just trying not to mess the whole thing up.
You're too kind, Charles. Too kind. Can you tell everyone where they can find, of course, if they don't know, they should, but can you tell everyone where they can find your mock drafts or anything else that you're working on currently?
Yeah, I think my 2 mock drafts are probably at NFL.com. Go into the mock draft section, and there's a bunch of us in there mock drafting like mad. My last mock draft should drop the day before the draft, so that should be April the 23rd. I believe Wednesday, April the 23rd. That should be my last one. Should drop there at NFL.com, and then we'll be on the mock draft. It won't be the mock draft anymore. It'll be the real draft. Okay, in Green Bay, starting April the 23rd. Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft show. We'll do that on Wednesday night on NFL Network, and then Thursday, round 1, Friday, rounds 2 and 3, and Saturday, rounds 4 through 7, all on NFL Network. Check your listings and come join us. We're going to have a good time, and we hope you like what you see and hope you like what you're hearing and want to stay with us.
Well, I know one thing. I definitely won't be joining in Green Bay, but I will be joining in. I'll be joining in, though.
Well, great. I'll wave to you from Green Bay. Absolutely. I'll wave to you from, as they call it, Titletown, USA. A little bit over 100,000 in terms of residents there. If you haven't been to Green Bay, hopefully people are coming out to join us for the draft. It should be a blast. But it is a true experience for a football fan to go to that town because that's what it feels like compared to going to Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis. It's hard to believe a place that has 100,000 people has an NFL franchise, but they do, and they have one of the better ones in the league.
That's true. That's true. Well, he is Charles Davis. I am Mike Patton. Of course, you can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter at Mike Patton82, MikePatton 82. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Touring the AFC South, you can find on all listening platforms, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it. We are there. And we're also on YouTube at the Mike Patton Network. I want to thank you all for tuning into this episode of Touring the AFC South. We're out. Peace.